Hi, this is State Senator Tom George. Welcome to my program Current Events, and once again I'm taping in Lansing, and today I have with me Mr. Jim Sygo. Jim, you are a Deputy Director at the DEQ Department, the Department of Environmental Quality.
That's right. I'm actually one of two deputy directors there. Stanley Pruss is the second deputy. My responsibilities, though, are over Waste and Hazardous Materials Division, our Air Quality Division, as well as our Remediation and Redevelopment Division. And that's the division that gets primarily involved in these types of cleanups, such as on the Kalamazoo River.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been in this position for?
I've been in this position since 2003 now, so it's been just about 4 years. But I've been an employee with the department since going back to the days when we were combined with the DNR back since 1983.
And Jim, what's your background? I know you have a degree in oceanography.
That's right. I actually have a bachelor's degree in meteorology and oceanography from the University of Michigan. I also have a master's degree in oceanography, and a lot of people seem to think, well, why would you study oceanography in Michigan? And quite honestly, it's a matter of when you deal with oceans, you're dealing with fluids. When you're dealing with fluids, it's very similar to Great Lakes as well. Mm-hmm. So the information from those types of courses extremely valuable in my career in dealing with the Great Lakes.
Now, in your current position, then you're involved in the work that's evolving regarding the Kalamazoo River Superfund site, and that's why I asked you to come on today in particular to talk a little bit about that and about the progress that's being made there. But I think before we get to that, we should set the scene a little bit and just talk about the river in general. And the stretch, it's about an 80-mile stretch. It's a federal Superfund site. Can you explain to us what that means?
Sure. Back in I believe it was 1970, the late 70s, it was discovered that there was an amount of contamination of polychlorinated biphenyls within the river, and it resulted in some of the first fish advisories that were placed in Michigan for PCBs. Later, as we progressed forward in 1984, at that time, the Department of Natural Resources became involved in the evaluation of the sediments of the river when we did discover significant quantities of PCBs in the river. And as we moved forward, we noted where these were coming from, and it was quite apparent that the responsible parties for the PCB contamination were primarily a number of the paper companies in the Kalamazoo area. Currently, we're working with primarily two organizations. One is Georgia Pacific as a responsible party, and also Millennium. What is their name? Millennium Development, I believe it is, and Millennium Holdings. And that particular company is representing some of the now defaulted paper companies in the area. And it's been for some time now, since 1990, the Kalamazoo River has been placed on the Environmental Protection Agency Superfund list. We've actively been working toward the work necessary to restore the river since that period of time, but one of the first things necessary in doing that is evaluating the sources of the PCBs that were being delivered to the river in some fashion through either discharge or areas that remain contaminated on the shoreline. So for a number of years, we've been dealing now with what we call operating units that were predominantly the paper company landfills and their surrounding areas where those types of paper sludges that had been released were located near those particular facilities, and trying to consolidate those and place those in contained units in the vicinity of those operations. A lot of those investigations and some of that work has now been completed, And as a result of this next step that was recently announced, we're looking at moving into the river and dealing with the impoundments now. The impoundments along the river are in areas particularly where hydroelectric dams historically had been located. And we actually are dealing with the first 4 right now, in that those impoundments have been extensively investigated, and we're trying to look at that data and determine how to approach the restoration of the river. In restoring the river and looking at that, we've been consulting as well with the Department of Natural Resources, as well as the Environmental Protection Agency and a number of other natural resource trustees, which I'll discuss in a minute, to try to look at what would be the best type of solution for restoration. And many people agree that the best solution would be to try to get the dams removed. These are very old dams. 3 of them, at least now, are in very bad disrepair. There have been orders issued on them to have additional actions taken to improve those. Those 3 are owned by the Department of Natural Resources, actually, and there's another one. Ownership may still be in dispute, but it's in the city of Sygo Dam, basically. So we're still dealing with the dams, but the big issue here was that several years ago, the proposal was not to look at the removal of the dams. And I think as a result of an effort that's been going on for a little over 2 years now, we've come to agreement not only with EPA and the trustees, but also with the responsible parties, that it may be in the best interest to have the dams removed as well, because the dams represent 2 things in the river. One, in terms of a future for the Kalamazoo River, it resembles a barrier, basically. And when you're looking at canoeing, when you're looking at better fisheries, you really want to have those dams removed. The other issue that the dams represent, though, is they're barriers for reducing the amount of sediment moving downstream. And while that's happened with floods, and it's happened over a long period of time, a lot of the bulk of the contamination within the river itself, the river sediments, are located in the impoundments right behind the dams. So removing the dams, it could be an exacerbation of a problem by letting materials continue to move downstream unless you deal with the sediments behind the dams first. And that's what a great deal of the negotiations and the mediations have been about over the past couple of years, and trying to get to yes between all parties so that we can take an approach that is best for the Kalamazoo River as well as the community.
Jim, I want to backtrack just a little bit and ask a little bit more about PCBs, the polychlorinated biphenyls. So these are chemicals that were a waste product of the de-inking process. It was something that the paper companies did to recycle paper and some of the manufacturing process, and then these were dumped into the river.
Right. It was a byproduct of their process in actually de-inking papers, and I think some have traced this back to, if you look at, if you recall the days when we had carbonless paper back in the 70s in particular, a lot of the carbonless paper, PCBs are also used as a plasticizer, and it was embedded in that as a plasticizer so that when you wrote on a carbonless paper, it would allow ink to go through to the next copy, basically. And that was another source that we believe existed, and as a result of recycling that paper, resulted in the contamination of the paper mill sludges that were ultimately processed, and some found their way into the river.
And so now